a moment that happens for a lot of people in unhealthy relationships that does not get talked about enough. It is not the first fight. It is not the worst argument. It is not even the day that something crosses a clear line. It is the quiet moment where you start wondering if you are the problem. You replay conversations in your head, you soften your voice, you change your behavior, you stop bringing things up because it's not worth it, and you tell yourself, maybe I'm just too sensitive. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe this is just what relationships are like. And from the outside, everything might look fine, maybe even great. But inside, something feels off. You feel smaller, you feel more anxious, and you feel less sure of yourself than you used to be. So today we're going to be talking about when love hurts, recognizing and leaving toxic relationships. And we're going to talk honestly about emotional abuse, why people stay, what safety planning can look like, and what rebuilding after leaving really involves. Before we go any further, I want to pause and I just want to say this really clearly. This conversation could be triggering if you have experienced emotional abuse, domestic violence, or controlling relationships. Thank you. Please listen in a safe space. Take breaks if you need to, walk away if you need to. And if today isn't the right day for this episode, it is okay for you guys to skip it. If you're like, hey, Jamie, I can't sit here and hang out, that's totally cool. Okay? I also want to be very clear about boundaries for this conversation. We are sharing general education and lived experience, not individual clinical advice and not legal advice. So little housekeeping, and then I swear I'll shut up. I won't shut up and keep going. Okay, so first things first. Hi, my name is Jamie. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders. I completed my internship to get my addiction license at Arizona State Prison, and I was an addiction counselor for about 4 years. Not all 4 years were spent there, but I did have a midlife crisis and decide I wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I wanted to quit my job and write full time. And then somehow in the process of that journey, I have ended up here on TikTok and talking about my story, my personal story through recovery and mental health issues. Very passionate about mental health issues. I am no longer a licensed therapist, but if I was a licensed therapist, I wouldn't be allowed to be your therapist. So just please know that anything I say here is educational and none of it is a substitute for therapy. Okay? And if you need resources, feel free to drop in the chat that you need resources. A girl will hook you up, I promise. Moving on. If you are in immediate danger, please contact your local emergency services or a domestic violence hotline in your area. Okay? Now, let's talk about the word toxic for just a minute. It's everywhere. Thinking about it, we hear this word all the time. We hear it on social media, we hear it in pop psychology, and we hear it in so many relationship advice videos. And while that word can be useful, it can also blur something really important. Because not every unhealthy relationship is abusive, and not every conflict means somebody is being harmed. So today we are talking specifically about emotional and psychological abuse in intimate relationships, patterns of behavior that undermine a person's sense of self, safety, and autonomy over time. Abuse doesn't always leave bruises, but it does leave marks. It shows up in how you second guess yourself, in how your world slowly gets smaller, in how your nervous system is always on edge, in how you feel like you're walking on eggshells, even on good days. And one of the hardest parts of emotional abuse is that it often comes wrapped in love. There can be affection, there can be apologies, there can be promises to change, there can be real moments of connection. Which is why the question, why don't they just leave, is not just unhelpful, it's actually harmful. Because staying is often about survival, about fear, about hope, about kids, about money, maybe immigration status, maybe disability, maybe culture, maybe faith. And threats that aren't always spoken out loud. So leaving isn't a single moment. For some, it's a process. And for many survivors, it is also the most dangerous time. And that's why today's conversation is not about judgment. It is about clarity. It is about naming patterns. It is about reducing shame. And it is about reminding people that what they are experiencing has a name, and that helps. I'm sorry. And that help exists. I made that all one word, guys. It's about reminding people that what they are experiencing has a name and that help exists. You are not weak for staying. You are not foolish for loving somebody who hurt you. You are not broken because it's taking some time to figure out your next step. You're human, and you deserve relationships that feel safe, respectful, and grounding, not confusing, frightening, or erasing. And today we are going to talk about what emotional abuse actually looks like, why people stay, how safety planning can work, and what healing after abuse can involve. This is not a checklist episode. This is not a do this and everything will be fine conversation. It's a truth-telling conversation. So wherever you're listening from, whether you're still in a relationship, thinking about leaving, or already out, or even supporting somebody you love, how something can be really hard to see clearly when you're in it and really hard to talk about out loud. And again, we're covering emotional and psychological abuse in intimate relationships. This is the kind of abuse that does not always leave visible marks, but it can deeply impact your self-esteem, your sense of safety, and your ability to trust yourself and others. I want to talk about what emotional and psychological abuse actually are, because we use the word toxic for all kinds of behavior. And in this episode, I want to get more specific. I will talk about some common patterns and red flags that can show up when love starts to hurt in a deeper way than just normal relationship. I want to talk about some common patterns and red flags, covered that. I'll explore the question that people on the outside of the situation often ask, which is, why don't they just leave? And I want to talk about why that question is so much more complicated than it sounds. And we'll look at some of the emotional and psychological and practical reasons that people stay in abusive relationships and why staying is often about survival and not a sign of weakness. Then I also want to talk a little bit about safety plans. I don't know how detailed we'll get in that because I want to keep it educational and I don't want it to sound clinical at all. And then we're going to try and talk a little bit about rebuilding life after abuse if we have enough time. When people hear the word abuse, a lot of us picture physical violence. We think about hitting, pushing, or obvious threats. But emotional and psychological abuse can be just as damaging and sometimes even harder to recognize, especially when you care deeply about the person who's hurting you. I always say that, you know, the little thing when we were kids and it'd be like, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I think there's some truth to the fact that that is all a lie, because you can heal from sticks and stones sometimes easier than you can heal from emotional damage. Of course, it is a case-by-case thing, but that's the reality. I feel like emotional abuse can sometimes be worse than physical abuse. Not that any of it is okay. And I need to watch how many times I said that word, because, yeah, since we're in territory that is a little questionable today with these words. So emotional abuse is a pattern of behaviors that somebody uses to control, humiliate, or break down another person emotionally. And it often shows up as repeated criticism, manipulation, or intimidation that leaves you feeling small, confused, scared, or like you're constantly walking on eggshells. It's not just, we had a fight, we're going through a rough patch. It's a pattern. That pattern takes a toll on how you see yourself and what you believe that you deserve. And most healthy relationships do have conflict. And that's not really what we're going to focus on here, because conflict is a great way for us to find out there's a problem. That doesn't mean it's a great excuse for us to kick each other's butts, right? And I'm not making light of this at all. Two people can love each other and still disagree, still have bad days, and still say things they regret. The difference is that in a healthier relationship, there is usually a willingness to repair or to take responsibility, to listen, to grow, and you feel fundamentally respected and emotionally safe, even when things are hard. Most healthy relationships do still have conflict. Two people can love each other and still disagree. We talked about that. In an emotionally stressful. That's what I'm going to substitute the word stress right now so that I'm not having to use it so much. But in an emotionally stressful relationship, conflict doesn't feel like two people working through a problem together. It feels like one person holding power over the other, and it feels like you're always wrong, or you're too much, or not enough, or always the one who has to change, apologize, or smooth things over. And some signs and patterns of this, as you listen, you might notice, can actually show up in other relationships too. Family, friends, and even coworkers. But again, we're focusing today more on intimate relationships, but the dynamics can certainly overlap into other areas. The first sign I want to talk about is constant criticism and belittling. And this can sound like you're stupid, you can't do anything right, nobody else would put up with you. And it might even be something that's framed as a joke or tough love. But you walk away from the conversation feeling smaller, embarrassed, or ashamed. And over time, hearing things like that chips away at your self-esteem. And you might even start believing that you are really the problem and that you're lucky that anybody loves you at all. Another big one is gaslighting. Oh my God. And gaslighting doesn't even have to fall into the spectrum of, relationships, like intimate relationships. Lord have mercy. Okay. So gaslighting is one of those things where somebody denies your reality so often and so convincingly that you start to believe that your own memory is false, that you must be remembering wrong, because there's just no way that you could be that forgetful, I guess is really what I'm trying to say. So gaslighting can look like things like that never happened, you're imagining things, you're crazy, you're too sensitive, or you're overreacting. Maybe they said something cruel and later they insist it was just I literally just said that, didn't I? Did I say that? I think I did. Maybe they said something cruel and later insist it was a joke. Maybe you catch them in a lie. And they somehow twist the story until you're the one apologizing. Over time, gaslighting can make you doubt your own judgment so much that you start relying on them to tell you what's real and what's not, because you can't even trust your own memory anymore. And another sign is controlling behavior. This doesn't always start in an obvious way. Sometimes it just begins as, I just worry about you, or I just love you so much, I want to know where you are. But gradually it becomes constantly checking your phone or messages, demanding your passwords, getting angry if you don't respond immediately, questioning about where you've been and who you were with. Control can also show up around clothes, hobbies, or how you spend your time. I don't like it when you wear that. Why do you need to go out? At first it might sound like care or jealousy framed as passion, but over time you might realize your world has gotten smaller and smaller, and that leads into another pattern, isolation. In emotionally abusive relationships, the other person might slowly cut you off from your support system. They might complain every time you see your friends or family, and they might start fights when you come home from seeing people you care about. And they might say things like, your family's toxic, your friends are a bad influence, nobody understands you like I do. Sometimes they create so much drama around you that spending time with others that it feels easier to just not go. Thank you so much. Before you know it, the people who used to remind you of your own worth and your options are further away, and you're more dependent on the person who's harming you. Another sign is using humiliation or shame as a weapon, and this can look like mocking you in front of others, teasing you about sensitive topics, making fun of your body, your background, your job, your dreams, and they might even share things that you told them in confidence, just to embarrass you. The goal, whether they admit it or not, is to keep you feeling so small that they feel big. Financial control is another form of emotional and psychological abuse. I also think financial control is one that is sometimes missed, because especially if you're in certain very conservative, or I don't want to say religious because I don't like that, but sometimes there are people who believe that the man is supposed to be in charge of everything, so they control the money, and that works for some people and it's healthy. So I guess I'll just put that clarifier out there. But then there's some times where the man controls everything and the woman has to go and ask for money, and the money is contingent on whether they do what they're supposed to, or if they've, committed a transgression, they may not get any, stuff like that. And I think that's one that really does get missed a lot. And I think we see this a lot when we see the woman who's, husband leaves them with nothing and takes everything. I think that a lot of times that's a role. It may not be the key factor, but I do think that sometimes that is devastating and it plays a role in, money trauma, which is a whole other topic. But anyway, threats and intimidation can also show up a lot in abusive dynamics. And not every threat is a direct, I'm going to hurt you. Sometimes it sounds like, if you ever leave me, I'll ruin your life. No one will believe you if you tell them what goes on here. I'll take the kids and you'll never see them again. If you leave, I'll hurt myself and it'll be your fault. Things like that. And one of the things about this is I don't even think it's just words. I think when you recognize an unhealthy relationship between two people, because I've been around people that were in abusive relationships, some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know, you see a look, and when your friend gets that look, that person who's giving them that look didn't have to say a word. That person already knows they're in trouble. And I think that these things create a climate of fear, and you feel like any step towards independence, especially if you're the person in the situation, or even any attempt to set a boundary, could trigger something just terrifying. And something else that can be confusing is what some people call the cycle of abuse. And there may be a buildup of tension, an incident like a blow up, a cruel comment, a scary outburst, and then afterward there's like the honeymoon phase. And in that phase, the person might apologize, cry, buy gifts, promise to change, or all of a sudden, act incredibly loving and attentive. Oh, you're the greatest thing on earth, right? What is the word for that? There's a word for that besides honeymoon phase. Just,
Love bomb? Is it
love
love bombing?
bomb. That is the word I was looking for. Thank you, Canada. Yes, love bomb. So love bomb is something that will often happen in these honeymoon phases. And these good moments are very real and they can be deeply meaningful, especially when you're desperate for the person you love to just treat you well. You're just like, oh God, you finally feel that relief. But at the same time, what's building that you may not even notice consciously at first is anxiety. And then once you start learning that this is a cycle, you're kind of waiting for the axe to fall the next time. Like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this while I can because tomorrow's a different day and I might be having a different person tomorrow. And these moments don't erase the pattern. They can actually make it harder to leave because you keep hoping that the loving version is the real them and that the abusive behavior is just a phase or they just had a bad day. You might even make excuses for them. Debbie says, I know about that all too well. I'm so sorry to hear that, Debbie. But I am glad you came out on the other side. As you listen to all of this, you might be doing a little bit of a mental checklist, thinking like, this sounds like something I've been through. This sounds like something I'm in. Some of this fits, some of it doesn't. But it's really important that as we go through this, that no list is going to capture every situation. And relationships do exist on a spectrum. So really the power of discernment is going to lie within you. But I feel like this is an important topic to talk about. Stage fright all of a sudden. What matters most is how you feel in the relationship. Here are a few reflection questions that if it's you in the situation, you can kind of ask yourself quietly and not with anybody else's opinion, just your own, okay? But do I feel emotionally safe with this person? Am I able to express my feelings without constantly walking on eggshells or without being mocked or punished? Do I have to hide parts of my relationship from friends or family because I'm afraid of what they will think? And do I feel smaller, more anxious, or less like myself since this relationship began? And if your honest answers to questions like these are painful, I do want you to know that your feelings are valid. You don't need bruises or proof to take your own discomfort seriously. Emotional abuse is still abuse. Psychological abuse is still abuse. And your experience, your feelings matter, and they're valid. And I also want to say if you recognize some of these behaviors in yourself that can be really uncomfortable, just maybe be more mindful because it may not be, again, it's on a spectrum. Let's just say everything's on a spectrum. So sometimes, boy, I am struggling today. Sometimes people who have been hurt or grew up around unhealthy dynamics can end up repeating those behaviors without fully recognizing it. So maybe you have angry outbursts and then you kind of like get over it fast, but you treat everybody like shit in the moment. Okay, so you can, that's adjustable. If you're having angry outbursts and you're beating the shit out of people, I mean, it's adjustable, but you probably need some therapy. I'm going to talk about why leaving an emotionally abusive relationship is so complicated and why just leave is not a helpful thing to say, why it's unfair to say. But I also want to talk a little bit about how people can safely get away if it's possible. But I do want to leave, before we move on to the next part, if love consistently feels like fear, confusion, or constant self-doubt, I want you to pay attention. Because you deserve relationships where you can be human, where you can make mistakes, where you have needs, and you can still be treated with basic respect and care. And all relationships are supposed to be reciprocal. So you got to give and take. It's okay to get angry at one another, especially if you're living in the same house. It is not okay to put hands on each other, call each other names, or it even be one-sided. I'm saying this as if two people do it, but oftentimes this is one-sided.
So last night I was hanging out with a bunch of friends and somebody actually asked me, Marcella, what do you think, what is something that you wish you'd been taught in school that you were not, that would have made you a better functioning adult? And I said emotional regulation and self-soothing. Not only that, but communication skills that would let me know that what was happening to me was not okay. And she said, you know what, she says a lot of people have been saying very much the same thing, that they wish they'd been taught. And it's funny because what some of the other answers were really great, financial literacy, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But this was the one thing that everyone was saying, communication skills, better communication skills, being able to express how we feel or tell people what's going on with us without feeling scared or being victim shamed.
Right. No,
it's really important.
I love that.
I
love that. And I actually love that you brought up the regulation because that goes so much deeper than just this. But that, you actually gave me chills saying that because that is something that I struggled with. And I really, even though I had a house full of chaos and we didn't have like DV or anything, I did not know how to emotionally regulate. So, whoo, you spoke to me, girl. Look at that. I got little goose pimples and everything.
Well, I wanted to say, as parents of, I wanted to say parents of girls, but then I thought about it and I was like, boy moms too.
Yes.
Boy moms too need to be able to get it because I know I have a really good son and I know you've got really good boys, but there are some women who have told me that their sons either abuse them or talk down to them, or they've seen the way that their sons treat their girlfriend, and it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
So, but as girl moms, because the boys will always be prioritized in certain cultures, that was the word you were looking for before.
Yeah.
Not religion, cultures.
Yes, cultures.
It's important that we are being fair.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that. And I was thinking about something while you were talking right now too. I'm not going to name the person publicly, but it's somebody I know and love was in an abusive relationship, and it was the girl who was abusive. And I'll tell you what, when I found out that they put their hands on this person, I didn't find out till 5 years later. Because had I found out, Jamie might not be sitting here today because she probably would have caught a case. But I was not okay with that. And I think people don't realize that there are men who get abused too, and they are stigmatized because they're abused. I think that I'm not going to say it doesn't happen as often because I haven't looked at any of the numbers, but I do think that it's very, very valid, and that we can't forget that men can be victims too. And I do think that there are times where the man gets accused of something. Like I actually saw a video where somebody called the 911 and was like, my husband's beating me, and he was actually secretly recording her the whole time. So when the police came, they took her to jail for false reporting. And I do think that happens. I just don't think that that's the norm. I do think that it does happen where, you know, I don't know, lost my train of thought.
Well,
But
if I may, the numbers for men in that situation are triple, if not quadruple, what is actually known. It's because men don't speak about it because of the stigma. So the
yes,
numbers are extremely high. And you would even have a couple where a man looks like he's a bodybuilder and the woman's like 5'2", and you would think it's the other way around, like he's abusing her, but
yes,
she's being but
yes.
she's just whipping his ass. But he doesn't want to say nothing because of the stigma of it. And it's not always just physical too. Women can be verbally and emotionally and psychologically abusive as
Oh,
well.
yes. Oh, yes. I
And so
knew
the men
somebody
don't want
that
to say
way.
nothing. You
Yeah.
know, they live in fear, like, okay, I got to do this because I don't want to piss her off. I got to do this because I don't want to get yelled at. It's just the same, but the numbers are just they're not reported. That's the sad part.
That's absolutely true because that is actually something I was thinking also was that the numbers we do have, they're gonna be underrepresentative of what's really occurring. And I think it happens with women too, but I think women are more likely to report it than men, for sure. And I think, if you look at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, that's kind of a good example where there was probably some mutual combat there, but I truly believe that it was more one sided. I'm not going to say what side I think was worse because I wasn't in that situation and I wasn't close enough. I only saw what was on TV. But I do think that it can also lead to reactive abuse where somebody acts out back. Like if you're going to push me, I'm going to push you. And then that might
That's
carry,
different.
yeah, might carry over into future relationships. So because this person hurt me, now I have to be. So I do think that there's that possibility as well. Emotionally intelligent, yes. I want to start a little bit with the emotional and like the psychological side of why people stay. And one powerful force that really keeps people in these relationships is trauma bonding. And I know that I feel like trauma bonding has become a buzzword. Like everybody wants to use that word. And I think that it really takes away from the meaning when we do that. Just like narcissists. Like I know Oliver that you said that and I agree with you. I know you were like being a little bit humorous and I agree with you, but at the same time, I feel like people just walking around calling everybody who's an asshole a narcissist is taking away from what that word actually means. And it's a diagnosis. So we really shouldn't be using it like that. The back and forth pain the back and forth of pain and comfort can actually make this trauma bond stronger. And this is the emotional attachment that has formed in relationships where there's a cycle of abuse and then affection. And then, so it's like criticism, gaslighting, threats, other harm, then good moments, then apologies, gifts, deep conversations that make up spicy time or promises to change. And that back and forth of pain, again, makes that bond stronger. So your nervous system is freaking confused because it's like, am I supposed to be okay? Am I not? So you end up just naturally always feeling on edge. And then you will tell yourself things like, they're not always like this. If I could just do better, they would love me. If I could just do better, we could go back to those good times. And I almost think in some ways it's possible, just possible, that love bombing could be slightly addictive for some, but that doesn't mean they enjoy it. Just like other things, that doesn't mean they enjoy it, but just a side note, because they're always looking for that next moment where that person will love them. I'm not saying that's always the case though. So another emotional reason people stay is hope. The abusive person has become the source of your hurt and the person you look to for relief from that hurt. And that's what makes the trauma bond so powerful. And that's what gives them hope. Hope is that the person they love will finally see what they're doing and change. Hope that the next apology is the last one they'll ever need to hear. Hope that they'll get the good version of their partner that day, or the one who's loving, funny, attentive, the real one, and that the hurtful behavior is going to go away. Then I also think we have fear of being alone. And I think even if you didn't start off with fear of being alone, you could easily develop the fear of being alone, because if somebody's telling you you're not good enough, then you're thinking nobody else is going to want me. Nobody else is going to want me but this person, so I just need to accept this. And it will wear down your self-esteem. And if your self-esteem is being worn down by constant criticism or gaslighting, you start believing, yeah, nobody else wants me. And so you will stay even when you're in pain, because that staying in that place is less scary than stepping into the unknown. Shame is another thing that plays a big role, and I think that this is where the why don't they leave kind of plays a role in this, because you're already dealing with shame because you think you're not even as good as the scum between their toes with some of these people. And so then when you go and ask for help and it's like, well, why don't you just leave? Well, thank you for making me feel shittier than I already feel. Many survivors feel ashamed that they allowed this to happen, even though they didn't ask to be abused, and it's not their fault. And they might think, what will people say if they find out what I've been living with? It could be embarrassing, and it shouldn't be, but it can be. And they might think I'm smarter than this, and that shame can make them not want to reach out for help. And I think, that's a scary way to live. On top of that, you have self-blame, which I think self-blame and shame can kind of not reciprocate, that they're synergistic to a degree. And I think with self-blame, when somebody is constantly telling you that you're the problem, that you provoked them, you're crazy, you're ungrateful, yeah, you're going to start to believe it, because words have power. That's why if you switch from saying I'm having a bad day to, I made it through the day, it can make a difference in how you live, even if you're going through a rough period. Somebody tells you you're this long enough, yeah, you're going to believe it. And you might stay because you think, I just need to fix myself. Then they won't get angry. Those are some of the emotional and psychological reasons. And I really feel like people on the outside of that just don't really understand. And sometimes staying is about safety, sadly. Sometimes leaving is more dangerous than staying. I think in the end, it's always dangerous, but there are times where it can get really scary. Research and advocates, domestic violence advocates, have pointed out that one of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship is actually when the survivor tries to leave or has just left. When an abuser feels they're control slipping, the abuse can escalate, sometimes from emotional to physical, or from threats to real violence. And many homicides related to DV happen during the separation or soon after. You do start to believe it and take it on as truth. Yes, you do. And I think I can relate to that, not on the DV aspect, but on the bullying aspect. If somebody says something to you enough as a bully, yeah, you're going to start believing it. So when somebody says, if it's so bad, why don't you just leave? They don't seem to realize, maybe they don't realize, that the person has already thought about leaving. They're terrified of what will happen oftentimes. And they do know their abuser's capacity for harm better than anybody else. Their fear is not irrational. It's realistic. So why don't they just leave? It's not that easy, right? And I always say this, like, we're complex creatures. Everybody's in a complex situation. So it's so easy to say, I would never do this. I would never do that. And it's not that easy. Canada says some don't leave because of culture, and it is taboo. I agree. Then you have the practical side, and this is where we come back to money and resources. Some survivors face serious financial barriers to leaving. If your partner controls the money, has kept you from working, has ruined your credit, or has put everything in their name, leaving could mean poverty, homelessness, or not being able to provide for your children. Or I've even heard of cases where they're like, you can leave, but you're not taking the kids with you. Sometimes that's just too unbearable for somebody. And I think that's understandable. And even if you are working, starting over is not cheap. You have to get new housing, deposits, furniture, legal fees for divorce or custody. It can add up quickly. And if safety is really a serious risk, not being able to, it could lead to not being able to provide for your children. And when you're already exhausted and emotionally worn down, the idea of taking on all of that can feel overwhelming. And you're probably already feeling about this big as it is. Children and pets are another huge factor. Many people, many survivors worry deeply about their kids' safety. And if they leave the abuser and the abuser gets court-ordered visitation or shared custody, some have been directly threatened. If you leave, I'll take the kids, I'll hurt the dog. If you're a parent, you might stay because you're trying to calculate the less dangerous option for your children in a situation where none of the options are really that safe. And I think that's what's important too, because it's really hard as a friend to watch, and it's really dangerous to try and help. So it puts you in a predicament as a friend, you know? Immigration status, disability, chronic illness, and lack of access to transportation or childcare is also another barrier. If your ability to work or live independently is limited, leaving might feel like it's not just hard, but something that you can't even do without support. And then you have, and I think like Mars said earlier, the cultural layer, which is some cultures don't allow divorce, or they shame you for divorcing, and they think that you should, I guess, just tolerate it. I don't really know if that's the right word, but they just believe that it's wrong for you to leave that situation and you have to find a way to make it work. And that's awful. That's awful. I don't even like thinking about people that have to deal with that, but you know, I can't imagine that. I guess I've always been blessed enough to have a lot of support in my life, so it's really hard for me to imagine how lonely it must feel. I mean, I can imagine it, and it hurts my heart. So they might be told that they took vows for better or worse, or that keeping family together matters more than their safety. Others may be part of a tight-knit religious or cultural community where speaking about abuse is seen as betrayal, where people are encouraged to forgive rather than to leave. If the abusive partner is well-liked, charming, or powerful in the community, there's another barrier. And you might fear that nobody will believe you, or that they'll side with your abuser. And in some cases, they do. They do have that. You might worry about being judged, ostracized, excommunicated, blamed. It's your fault for breaking up the relationship, even though you're the one that's being abused. So when you put all of this together, trauma bonding, hope, fear, shame, financial barriers, children, immigration, health, community pressure, it becomes really, really clear that just leaving isn't a simple choice. And that's one of the goals of today's topic, is to recognize that this is a complex situation. You might be thinking, okay, yeah, this is me. I get why I've stayed, but what do I do? Well, I'm going to try and say this with as much love and compassion as I can, because this is a safe space and this is a judgment-free zone. Whatever you have done to survive up to this point makes sense in the context that you have been in. Staying close does not mean you are weak. Leaving does not mean you're selfish. You are making choices inside a situation that was never fair to begin with. And it's important that you know that, because you don't owe anybody a simple story about why you stayed or why you leave. You do not have to justify your timeline to people who weren't there and don't understand your situation. And at the same time, if a part of you is starting to wonder about your safety, or starting to imagine a life where you're not constantly afraid, that part of you deserves to be listened to. And taking that seriously doesn't always mean leaving immediately. For many, it can start with gathering information, talking to someone confidentially, and slowly building a plan. We're going to talk about sometimes when people don't leave, why they don't leave, but if they do try to leave, we're going to discuss a little bit about how they can safely plan to exit the situation. So I want to talk about something, like I said, called safety planning. When we hear about abusive relationships, it can be really tempting to jump straight to solutions when you are on the outside. You have to leave, or you have to stay for the kids, or you should do XYZ. But if there's one thing I hope you take from this episode, it's that there is no one size fits all answer. Again, complex humanity, right? Safety is complex. You are the expert on your own situation. Nobody else is the expert but you. You know what you have to deal with day in and day out, minute by minute, hour by hour, whatever it is that you have to deal with, nobody else does. But safety planning is something that requires thinking very carefully and realistically about your risks, your options, and your support, and making a plan that fits your life as it actually is, not as other people think it should be. It can apply whether you're staying, thinking about leaving, or already out but still dealing with danger. So here's some general ideas that can sometimes be helpful. These are just ideas. These are not set in stone solutions. It's kind of like a brainstorm to help you find what could work for you. And again, this is not personal advice for your specific situation. So some of these may not fit, but you get to decide what feels realistic and what doesn't, and we can just kind of bounce these ideas. What does being safer look like for you right now? For some, being safer might mean reducing how often arguments escalate. For others, it might mean quietly gathering documents and money so that if they need to leave quickly, they can. For someone else, safety might mean planning a way to leave the relationship entirely. Your answer might change over time, and that is okay. One piece of safety planning focuses on physical safety in the moment, especially during arguments. Trying, when possible, to move arguments to rooms with an exit and with fewer things that can be used as a weapon, like staying out of the kitchen or garage if you sense that things are getting heated. Avoiding arguing in small enclosed spaces like bathrooms or closets where it's harder to get away. If it feels safe enough, planning to step outside, go to a neighbor's, or move to a more public part of the home if you feel like things are escalating. None of this is about blaming you. So if someone chooses to be violent or abusive, their behavior is their responsibility. These are just tools that some people use to try and reduce your risk in the moment. Another piece to consider is, who can you reach out to in an emergency? Is there a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, a family member who knows at least a little about what's going on? Is there somebody nearby that you can call and go to if you feel unsafe? Some people create a code word or a phrase with someone they trust. You might agree that an example would be, you might agree that if you text, "Hey, did I leave my red jacket at your place?" That's code for, "I'm not safe. Please call the police." Or, "Please call me and stay on the phone." The exact code can be anything as long as it's something that won't raise the suspicion if your partner saw it. The other thing that's come about is there's the universal hand signal. I was going to show it, but I just forgot it. But they do have the universal hand signal. I think it's like this. Oh, look, you can't even see what I'm doing. I think it's like this. Like this. But I can't remember. And I think you just go like this if you need help. I'll have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's how it's done. That is one way too. So if you're out in public, now the problem with this is not everybody knows it. Not even first responders always know it. But if you live in an apartment or a shared building, you might think about whether there's a neighbor you could quietly talk to in advance. Someone whose door you can knock on if you need help, or someone who would call for help if they hear serious signs of danger. Another part of safety planning is gathering important items and information you might need in case you need to leave quickly. Passports, IDs, birth certificates, children's birth certificates, immigration, health insurance cards, bank account numbers or credit card info, or a list of at least important phone numbers that are written down in case your phone is taken or erased. Some people keep a small amount of cash hidden somewhere safe, separate from the abuser, because abusers can sometimes control cards or banking access, and that might be in a safe place at work with a trusted friend or in another hidden spot that you feel comfortable with. So depending on your situation, you might assemble like a go bag, and the go bag can have some essentials, maybe clothes, medications, keys, important documents again. Not everybody can do this safely, and that's okay. It's just something I'm throwing out there. Now, we can also talk about technology and digital safety, because this is another part of how control can show up. So if it is safe for you to do so, you might consider checking your phone, computer, and tablet settings for any unknown apps or programs that can track your location or activity. You can turn off location sharing on social media. in apps where your partner might be able to see where you are. Things like Snapchat. I know, like with the iPhone, my kids can turn on and off the option if they're like traveling for me to see where they are. So you can look into things like that. Or you can create and use a separate email account or messaging app to communicate with trusted people, advocates, be in your circle to help you. And you don't want to save the password on shared devices, of course. You want to be cautious about searching for help or resources on devices that your partner has access to, and clearing browser history when you can do so safely. In some situations, it may be safer not to change passwords or settings right away because the sudden changes can provoke suspicion. That's why talking with a trained advocate, if you can be helpful. They can help you think through what is the safest thing in your unique situation. Now, if there are children involved, this is another thing you have to take into consideration when safety planning. And that might mean being able to explain to them in age appropriate ways about how kids can get help in an emergency, how to call a trusted adult, whose house to go to if they're a neighbor, how to call emergency services. If you live, those types of things. Planning with older children where they can go if things escalate at home, like can they go to a neighbor's or relatives without encouraging them to intervene in dangerous situations. Because you don't want to encourage, kids, especially if it's a lot of kids are very protective of their mothers. So, a lot of kids are going to come in and intervene and not realize that it might be a really, really dangerous situation. So letting schools or childcare providers know who is allowed to pick up the kids if you're at a point that's safe and appropriate to share. Again, everything I'm saying is situation dependent. Now, one thing I want to cover that I don't know how often is covered, Crafty might be able to tell me later on if I'm hit or miss with this, but emotional safety planning, because your safety isn't just physical. Being in an abusive relationship can be emotionally exhausting and isolating. And you might think about who are the one or two people in your life you feel safest being honest with, who they're not going to judge you, and they're, even if you don't share every detail, that you can start talking to about how you feel, and they're going to be supportive without trying to make things worse. Are there small things you can do that help stay grounded? Can you journal? Is it safe to keep a journal? Can you take a short walk? Can you practice breathing? And are there any online communities or support groups that are offline or hotlines where you can talk anonymously if you're not able to go to people in your real life yet about your situation? Because it's scary. And I think in these situations, support is like the best thing that you can have, positive support. And building emotional support isn't going to magically fix your situation, but it can give you the strength you need to maybe start making more decisions with clarity. So if you're at a point where you're thinking about leaving and you want a safety plan, think carefully, decide on who, if anyone, will know about your plan where you'll go immediately after you leave, and consider what to do if your abuser tries to contact you afterwards. So for many people, leaving is not a one-time event, but it is a process. And I think this is where it can become cyclical, because sometimes you do get away and they either manipulate you into coming back or they threaten you into coming back and you feel like you don't have an option. So just because somebody leaves once and then goes back doesn't mean they're a terrible person. We don't know what their risks and their safety is. So I don't know. So I played topic roulette today when I was trying to pick this topic. Ooh, look at that. Stash can. Those are perfect for papers and stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna have you share in just a minute then, because I think you're gonna be able to share a lot. So if you need a DV hotline or anything like that, I'm more than happy to help if you reach out to me via DM. Because
It's a hairspray can, so it has the nozzle on top just like it's a hairspray. The back describes hairspray. It has the chemicals that hairspray would be in there.
Okay.
So it's also I'm sorry, there's cars. It's insulated, so if they shake it, they're not going to hear money or things swishing around inside.
Okay. I
And you
love
can just
that.
leave it in your bathroom. I used to sell these.
I love that you and I have seen the self-defense keychains. I just always wonder how helpful that would be because I feel like that would be situation dependent too because it could be used against you.
The self-defense stuff, it's kind of iffy because most of the times what happens is they get it away from you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And it's more dangerous, because they're stronger. Um, but if you want to have another live at a different time and we can talk about, I was saying that I've seen it from all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
People,
You're going on my
people that I
guest list.
know, yeah, people that I know, people that I just worked with and advocated for, people that I helped to get out. Um, and then, unfortunately, like I said, the dark side where I myself was very emotionally abusive because of my fear of abandonment from the domestic violence I witnessed growing up, So,
Yeah.
um,
You know what?
it's,
When Mars, I don't know if you were in here. I think you were just coming up when Mars had talked about emotional regulation. Do you think that
mhm.
that impacted your abilities with to emotionally regulate?
Yes, because, well, one thing is I was always silenced. I never had a voice.
Okay.
Um, so that was a big thing, not, having the fear of speaking out to help my mom because it just really felt like a hopeless and helpless situation coming from a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was that one that would say, you can go, but, Noah can't go. So my mom stayed
Yeah.
for part of that reason. The other part was you talked about shame. Her being in an interracial relationship
Mm-hmm.
during the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
um, she felt like she couldn't go back home.
Yeah.
She was getting what she deserved. She was getting what she was told she was going to get if she went off with the black guy. So
Yeah.
she stayed because she would tell me a lot. She didn't want to hear, I told you so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I don't
that was
think people
another
think about the
factor.
impact of that on people until it's too late, unfortunately, you know.
Right,
And
right.
Debbie just said she puts her keys between her fingers and makes a fist when she doesn't feel safe. That's a good idea. So I had a friend when I worked in the prison, and she had these pins that like they're ultra fine points, but they're very sharp, and she used to call it her stabby pen. And she said, "Let somebody come at me." And so
Well,
I
when I
think
would
in
teach
those
my
cases, grab
situational
anything.
awareness classes, I would tell women always carry a pen. It's legal everywhere you go.
Yes.
They're not going to confiscate a pen from you. And you can do damage with the pen with enough adrenaline and fear behind you.
Yes.
Um, and the thing with, when you don't feel safe being out, that's the situational awareness aspect of
Yes.
always being aware of your situation and the surroundings around you. Don't be afraid to be loud. That was hard for me growing up because I was silenced so much.
Yeah.
And now I'm this loud person. I went opposite. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to be in your face. You might not like it, but I'm not going to be shut up
Right.
anymore. But that makes you less of an easy target. You're going to be hard because you're going to fight. I'm going to go for the meek, quiet one that's trying not to be seen, because I probably have an easier time
Yeah.
versus, the loud, boisterous one that is going to fight you. Um, and, just avoiding places that could put you in harm's way. Public restrooms, staircases, parking garages are like some of the most dangerous places for women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did also want to speak just really quickly about the reverse of it. And what Canada said is true. The numbers for men are so high compared to what is um, reported because of the stigma around that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just went through helping one of my nephews get through a situation where he was being abused,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't even recognize it as he was being abused,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and he's that big bodybuilder person that, you're talking about, that you call the police, they're never in a million years going to think that he wasn't the one that was being physical, that it was the little lady that looked
Right.
so sweet, but she
Yeah.
was just a screaming banshee 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. 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 No, and I believe it. And the reason why that was when I said I don't know the numbers, but I believe it's really underreported is because I was thinking about the SA aspect that can sometimes go hand in hand with DV. And we know that a lot of male victims or survivors in that area who've had that happen is also severely underreported. And we are starting to see more of it now.
1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 and 1 in 6 boys before the age of 18. So they're really neck and neck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and women can definitely be abusers,
Yes.
not all boys were assaulted by same sex. A lot of them
Yes.
have, teenage babysitters and friends of the family, and like a lot of the time it's not a big scary stranger. It's your coach, it's your teacher, it's
Hmm.
your clergyman, it's your next door neighbor, it's the family friend,
I've
someone
seen
who,
teachers, and I
yeah.
don't mean just on the SA side. I mean on the DV side. Like,
And I know, because I could be very emotionally abusive.
yeah,
I have been in the past, using my fears to hold someone hostage in a relationship.
yeah,
It's sad, but I recognize it. I don't thank God for my husband,
yeah.
but
Well, and
I recognize it. But
I think that that does happen too sometimes. But then people realize this is one thing that I don't like about the stigma of ZV. If somebody is able to rebound and realize I fucked up, then I don't think that we should be holding that against them forever. Now, when you have somebody who's repeatedly abusing spouses or girlfriends or whatever, that's a cycle they're
right,
not trying to fix. Because
right.
crisis can lead to DV. There are a lot of one and done cases DV, but there are a lot that are cyclical. And I think that people lack discernment when it comes to recognizing those as well.
I think growing up, seeing my mom, what she went through, kind of, I tried to take a far different path. I didn't want to mirror her in any kind of way.
Right.
Um, but the relationship I'm talking about, where I was emotionally abusive, that was a teenage,
Hmm.
thing. So up until adulthood, but I was 10 years with that person from the time I was 14 to the time I was 24 years old.
Hmm.
So um,
So you were
that was
still dealing with an underdeveloped brain too.
exactly, and I had not taken a look at my trauma at all. So once I went into therapy, and once I started, learning about being more emotionally intelligent, um, and then I could take accountability for what I know that I did, right?
Right.
So I don't have any ill feelings towards that person. It was just, people come in your life for a time, for a season, sometimes a long time, sometimes a lifetime, sometimes just so you can learn your lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thank him for that, because I definitely feel like I learned my lesson. My husband got a much different version of me,
Right.
a more, aware and healed version of me. I have never in 26 years ever spoken any ill to him. Like, even in an argument, I've never been, never, because you can't take it back.
Right.
And
Right. And I do
I,
think that words, I think you weren't in here yet, but I was talking about how I think, we used to say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And I feel like emotional abuse is
oh, it's the
sometimes
worst.
actually worse than physical abuse because you can actually heal from the wounds of a
Right,
break easier than you
right,
can. Because that, your body heals over the scar, right? But your brain, you have to
right.
reframe everything the way you think.
So a long time for me, I could not let go of the anger, the hurt, the sadness, the fear, all of those emotions. I couldn't let go of them because I realized that I've had them for so long. Who would I be without them? I
Right.
kind of relied on them, right? It's easy. It's an easy go-to thing to be upset versus having to really sit with what's going on, think about it, and then deal with it intelligently.
Right.
So now, when I get upset or something is bothering me, I shut up. Before, I was gonna pop off. I was a firecracker. But now I take my time to deal with it and say, am I really tripping out, or is this something I should really be worried about? Because I know that I can be very emotional and really exaggerate things. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging with me, all of you. I appreciate you. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday evening. I guess I'm going to go take a nap like an old lady on a Friday night at 5:30 p.m.